Good afternoon. Welcome to Digging Deeper, where we get to dig a little bit deeper into the text that's used for Sunday in our Sunday worship service. These are meant to be just really short clips that you can use while you're driving, while you're doing laundry, at any point during the week. So today, we're at the story of Jesus walking on water and Peter walking on water from the Gospel according to St. Matthew. And it comes from Matthew 14, verses 22 through 33. But I want to focus on the first verse because when I was reading this, I noticed a word jumped out to me that hadn't stuck out to me before, and I think it's got importance for us in our life as Christians. Verse 22 says, immediately, that's right after Jesus fed the 5,000. So that's the story that precedes this. He feeds the 5,000 with just a few loaves and a couple of loaves of bread and a couple of fish. So it says, immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. And what struck me this time was that word made. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. And I thought that's really strong language. Is that reflective of the Greek? And it turns out it is. It's, to compel, to kind of force someone. Jesus really, he made them get into the boat. And why did he make them get into the boat? So he could get to prayer. Now, Jesus is mentioned praying only twice in the gospel, according to Matthew, and that's here and in Gethsemane. Now we expect that Jesus prays elsewhere. I mean, he talks to his heavenly Father elsewhere. He spends time in the desert fasting. Ostensibly, that was with prayer as well. But really, Jesus just spending time in devoted prayer with God, with his heavenly Father. This is one of two times in the gospel according to St. Matthew, at least in my studies. If I'm wrong on that, someone email the church, let me know. But this word made, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat so that he could go pray. That's kind of incredible. I mean, in other words, get out, y'all. Leave me alone. I've got to pray. That's kind of not what we picture with Jesus. Maybe an opportune moment. Maybe he takes the burden upon himself to get up early and pray. Maybe he stays up late praying. Garden of Gethsemane, he says, come out to this garden with me while I pray before I'm crucified. And he goes and he makes time for it. But here, Jesus is saying, y'all got to get out so I can pray. And he doesn't even tell them why. He doesn't spiritualize it. He doesn't tell the disciples, leave me alone so that I can grow more holy. He doesn't say anything like that. He just says, go, you got to get in the boat. And we know that he needed to pray. He needed that time alone with God. And what it brings to mind for me is just wisdom from a book that I'm reading and just really love. It's called Telling Yourself the Truth. It's by William Backus and Marie Chapian. I hope I got those names right. But it's called Telling Yourself the Truth. And there's a statement in there that is worth exploring in the context of the gospel. And it's this: your needs are as important as the needs of others. Your needs, friends, are as important as the needs of others. I want to break that down because it's not certainly what's preached oftentimes from the pulpit, where it's, Philippians 2, do not consider your own interest, but look to the interest of others. That's this self kind of giving love is important to preach, but I think this Jesus making the disciples get into the boat is a different message, that your needs are as important as others. Jesus' needs were as important as the disciples and the crowds. Now let's break that down. Your needs are neither less important than others, but they're not more important than others either. In other words, there's a real call to generosity if your needs are met. I'm challenged by this. If your needs are met and others' needs aren't, Guess whose needs we've got to tend to? If my needs are met, but yours aren't, and I'm tending to my wants, and you have needs, guess what I've got to adjust? Guess who's got to adjust? It's me. If I'm at the point of tending to wants and you're still in need, I've got to adjust. Um, no, I think that can play itself out in 1,000 ways interpersonally. The way it's playing out in my life is looking at Episcopal Relief and Development, our Episcopal World Relief agency, and realizing that people don't have basic needs met all around the world. I mean, I could have neighbors that don't have basic needs met, and that's where I'd want to start. If my family doesn't have needs met, that's where I've got to start. But if they do, then I've got to give. All right, so let's keep plumbing deeper down into this quote. So your wants aren't as important as others' needs, but their wants are not more important than your needs. So if you are tending to your wants and you want me to do something, but I have needs, guess what is a holy responsibility to attend to? Not your wants, but my needs. I mean, I know my pronouns you may get confusing, but let me put it in terms of second person pronouns, talking to you. Um, if you have a family member or a friend or a neighbor who wants you to do something for them, with them, etc., and you're at a place of where you actually need something to be healthy, to be well, to live, guess who gets to take priority then? You do. Not your family member, not your neighbor, not your friend. So another way of putting this, again, this comes from Telling Yourself the Truth, that book I mentioned. But your job is not to please your family, your friends, your neighbors, your bosses. It's to please God. That's worth repeating. Your job is not to please your family, your friends, your neighbors, your bosses. Your job is to please God. Now, I hope in the process you can please all those relations in your life. That's a great thing, but that's not your job. Your job is to please God. And then and so what do we do? How do we do that? Well, I think we enter discernment at points when we're feeling out of balance um, about what do we need and what do we want. Sometimes we confuse those in our lives. What are real needs and what are only wants? I think if you really do that work and really analyze that, just kind of throughout the day, pay attention to that, you'll find that you don't need very much to be happy and healthy. You don't need very much to please God, but you do have some needs. And if those needs aren't being met, it's a holy act, a God-pleasing act to tend to them. And it's not to discount your wants. You can tend to those too. But needs come first. And then the needs of others. And so you can ask, do that discernment. Is what this person is expressing to me, my spouse or my parent or my child or my neighbor or my boss, is it a need or is it a want? And if it's a want and not a need, then there's real discernment. Is this want something that I want to meet, or I should meet, or I ought to meet, or I have a obligation to meet? Or is it just something they want and I don't have to meet? Or do they have a real need? If they have a need, God, what have you given me? Time or money or talent or whatever it may be. What have you given me, God, to meet this person's need? It could be a spouse, it could be neighbor, it could be someone around the world. What have you given me to meet this person's need? So there you have it. Jesus made his disciples get into a boat to meet a need that he had to spend time with God. It may not have pleased them, but his job wasn't to please his disciples. His job was to love them. His job was to love God, and his job was to love himself. Isn't that all of our jobs? To love God, to love our neighbor, and to love ourselves. Thanks for tuning into this. I hope it was helpful to you. If you want to talk deeper, please contact our church office, and I'll put that in the comments section.